Well, this exhibition is going to be a gallery full of guns that are actually found forms. I found the forms of the guns on YouTube, and they'll be suspended from monofilament, hanging in the gallery. And the reason they'll be suspended is because the negative shapes of the guns are so interesting. If I pack them together, you lose the individual character of the guns. But I discovered by accident a community of boys on YouTube that make tutorials of how to make guns, and also just videos of, hey, this is my cool gun that I just made. And a lot of them make videos back and forth, helping each other make components or trying to outdo each other. And I thought it would be an interesting project to sort of recreate those forms and put them in the context of a museum. So my goal is to create a space of hanging guns that the viewer walks through. And the gallery is huge, so it'll be the gallery is 26 by 55 or so, so it'll be a large installation. Well, typically my work is either found objects or found form, and I think that I just vary. The last big project I did was made out of computer keys taken from discarded computer keyboards. Probably like 100,000 of them were involved in a 3-wall installation I did. And I like the history of the use. While the keys are similar, like say 2 keys from a beige keyboard, say 2 X's, you'd think they were the same, but no 2 keys are the same because of the history of their use. And some of the keys were from brokerage firms and Fortune 500 companies, as well as individuals. And so that piece is sort of a good example of my work with found objects. Then I've got other work that's found form, like this piece, where I recreate the form. In this case, the form exists in cyberspace, and well, the form really exists at someone's house, and then I found it in cyberspace, and now I'm giving it physical form again. And I've also worked with found form through casting and fabrication. Before the keys, I'd done some other pieces involving outmoded technology. I'd made some pieces out of SCSI cables, I don't know if you remember those, and power cords and phone cables with the little clear plastic thing that you'd plug in the wall. Yeah. Hardly anybody has those anymore. Yeah. And so I liked, while those things were all visually compelling or formally compelling, I also liked the fact that they talked about technology and communication systems and just the human desire to communicate. So the keys actually grew out of that. I was thinking what else sort of works within that framework of technology and communication system. And then the guns, I was also sort of thinking about communication, but it was a total accident that I saw the first video, and I was really hooked when I saw it. So it's a combination of formally responding to a material, but also having an idea. I can't really say which comes first. Okay. Well, the first video I saw, the boy looked like he was about 8, or maybe even younger, with a high voice, and I was just amazed. I think it was a sniper rifle. I was amazed at how much knowledge he had about the workings of this rifle and how much confidence he had. I mean, he knew things that I didn't know. And then I was also pretty impressed with how inventive he was. Just out of the simplest materials, paper and tape, he made a pretty complex form. And when I started looking at the other videos, I was just blown away. Like pump-action shotguns that spit out rounds, and 5 shooters where a revolver, you know, an arm comes out and the 5-cylinder thing spins around so you can load the bullets, and levers and moving parts, just incredibly inventive out of the most simplest of materials. And of course they all figured it out for themselves. It's not like they went and bought at Toys R Us some kit how to make one of those. But another aspect of the whole project that, or of all of my work that's engaging, is that history element. Like with the computer keys, the keys were often personalized. Keys from a manufacturing plant might have grease marks. Some teenager, I'm sure it was a teenager, covered her keys with hearts. There was fire-damaged keys and nail polish on keys, and keys where the letters were worn off. And I like what that personalization says about the individuals and culture who used those things. And similarly with the guns, I thought it was interesting what the boys were saying, like that snub nose revolver, that 5-shooter I was talking about. That boy had a great story of going to shoot that gun with his grandfather. That was his grandfather's gun, and it had a terrible kickback, that just about knocked him over. But he was making that gun in response to that experience, whereas other kids picked World War II guns and a lot of guns from video games that are futuristic, like Halo. And during the videos, funny things happened. Like one boy was doing a tutorial about how to make his gun, and his dad walked into the kitchen and said, "Who are you talking to?" And he said, "I'm making a YouTube video, shh." And his dad took something out of the refrigerator and left, and the boy said, "That's my dad, he's cool." Just that sort of personalization, it's analogous to the keys, but it's interesting to me. I guess I sort of think of the artist kind of in the role of anthropologist. It's not scientific, but I'm not making forms and representations out of my imagination. I'm sort of culling things that I'm finding, and I'm interested in what they say about the people who made them or used them. I think the negative space of the guns is so interesting that I wanted to come up with some way to display them so that they weren't touching each other, so that you could appreciate how great the forms are. And I've always been struck by the height of the spaces at the Contemporary. They're incredibly high, and I love the clear story windows just under the roof. I think those windows are a defining characteristic of the space, and they were a source of inspiration for me. In the past, when I've gone to the Contemporary, I've been struck by how natural light from those windows enters into a gallery, even when you're not near any visible windows, like even if you're in the middle of the museum. So I thought that hanging something from those windows or from adjacent to those windows would be an interesting idea. And after I came up with so I had that idea actually before I had this project in mind. I always thought accessing those windows and the verticality of the space would be interesting. Because whenever I've gone there and looked at work on the walls, I've always been aware of this huge mass of vertical space just sort of pressing down. So the combination of that space and wanting to allow lots of negative space around the forms of the guns sort of inspired me to hang them, and it's going to be a real nightmare to hang them. But also I like the idea of the viewer interacting and walking through the space, and the viewer they may not even realize initially that they're looking at guns when they're in the first gallery. So I like the anticipation and then the aha and then the experience of walking through. Creating an installation in such a big gallery really creates a physical experience over time for the viewer, and that's something I'm very interested in, versus if I put them on pedestals, for example, and they were discrete objects, that would be a very different kind of experience. I think by hanging them, they can become something else in toto that I'm interested in. Well, it is important to me that the whole piece be white on white. I like that sort of spare, minimal color to accentuate the form, and I think the light and shadow hitting the form, especially with some natural light coming in from the windows above, will be very compelling. So in the gallery I'm in, one of the walls at 12 feet in height, from 12 to 26 and a half is concrete. So I want to make sure that I'm hanging everything from 12 down so that you get that white on white experience with the fine monofilament. I think it'll be very visually compelling. Well, I definitely think about the kind of experience the viewer has. I was talking about the artist as anthropologist, but I'm also making an installation that's got to last for several months. So, for example, there are some things technically that I've had to change just to make the stuff last for 4 months. But I have thought about different forms relating to each other, and certainly when I hang the guns, the way I hang them will be to make something visually compelling. So it's sort of a balance of trying to be true to the source, the found form, but also trying to create a compelling experience for the viewer. But I think the discovery of this body of videos just has so much interesting stuff in it to mine that I think that it should be a pretty visually interesting experience to walk through this gallery. Well, I hope so. One thing I forgot to mention is that the row of guns on the floor that will go from about 12 feet high down to the ground is all going to be on stands. So like this M134 Vulcan is on a tripod. This boy actually made this, and he says in the video he used 1,400 sheets of 8.5 by 11 printer paper to make it. Here's a DP-28, a World War II Russian gun with a really funny looking magazine that's got a bipod and a couple others there. So anyway, the whole floor row will be on stands, and then that will transition into the hanging guns, which will go up to 12 feet. So